Hello and welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. And this is the player ratings video for Everton's 2-0 defeat away to Manchester City. About as predictable a game as I can imagine, to be perfectly honest. I think if you'd asked me before the game how I thought it would have gone, that's pretty much how I would have said it. And it's quite optimistic to be fair, because there's there's every chance you go to Manchester City and you get absolutely stuffed from the first whistle, and completely roll over. But I had in my head that we'd stick at it for a bit, maybe have one or two decent chances that we live to regret later on. Um, and then the second half, tired legs after an international break, and their ability to just, basically make quality subs will completely change the game. And most likely Erling Haaland will finally be able to make the breakthrough with one of his first chances of the game. So yeah, that's pretty much how it transpired. I remember a game a few years ago, pretty much exactly like this, where Haaland scored twice in the second half after some valiant resistance from us. Um, so it's not the end of the world, this result, I don't think. I think for the most part we actually did our job pretty well, and it's just a few lapses in concentration that you just can't afford against a team like Man City, but that so many teams just fall victim to because they're that relentless. So yeah, not overly concerned. Like I said, I'm going to be going through each player individually. And yeah, I think there were definitely a standout performer, and maybe one or two names who, for the last few weeks, to be fair, it's kind of a bit of a running theme of looking a tiny bit out of their depth now. To be fair, and I think maybe some sort of consideration should go towards trying to ease them out of the side, and obviously looking ahead to January as well. If there is anyone available in the market, those positions should probably be prioritised if possible. But we'll start with Jordan Pickford, who obviously his first game after signing a new contract. Really positive week for him with England, getting them through to the World Cup, and earning that record outright now, away from Gordon Banks with the consecutive clean sheets. Clearly, England's number one. We all know how Everton fans feel about him, and it was mostly similar from him today. I thought, there's been a few people saying he maybe should have done a bit better for both goals. I do honestly think that's quite harsh, especially the second one. He's clearly unsighted by that one with Tarkowski in front of him, and then the first goal. It's a free header for Haaland really from what 10, 12 yards out, wherever it was, and you're always going to back him. He's pretty much got the pick of the goal to put his header wherever he likes. So, and he made a few, like several very important saves for us throughout the game, especially towards the end. And so yeah, we basically have Pickford to thank for the fact that it wasn't a cricket score. You could argue, Haaland was clearly hunting down that hat trick towards the end, but Pickford was able to deny him. So, not a he's definitely had better performances from us, but I think it's very unfair to put any sort of criticism on him for either of those goals, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, a standard six for Jordan Pickford. Moving into the French, Jake O'Brien is, yeah, who I was hinting at towards the start, as one of them who is starting to look a little bit out of his depth now. Obviously he's been playing out of position at right back ever since Moyes came in, really, having not really got much of a sniff under Dyche. And for the most part, he's looked pretty solid there and done a good job. But yeah, it's quite clear teams seem to be targeting him a little bit more now, and with what City are able to offer on those wings with Doku and Savino alternating and just offering a lot of danger down those sides, a lot of pace, able to start off wide and drive and get in behind, stretch the defence. And obviously O'Brien's not the slowest, but yeah, you've just got to be on your game all the time. And yeah, it can be difficult if it's just attack after attack after attack, and Manchester City were clearly trying to target that. So yeah, it's a little bit concerning. I probably I would have been tempted to maybe start Coleman for this one if I'm being perfectly honest. I know, there's definitely concerns over his fitness nowadays and how much he's actually got left in the tank, and if he's even really able to play at Premier League level. But I think he's proved in the week with Ireland that he's still a player who's capable of completing a match to a fairly high standard, and just a more natural right back who's had experience of dealing with these tricky wingers for so many over the years. I remember Zaha used to always be able to lock up, just an example off the top of my head. Um, but obviously Moyes will have a clearer idea of whether or not he's still got the legs to be able to do that job. So yeah, I don't want to go in on O'Brien too much. I don't think he was incredibly bad, but I think you could place a lot more blame on him for both goals, to be honest, rather than Pickford. I think he's caught out a little bit by the running behind for the first one, and then he's kind of out of position for the second one as well. I think it's quite telling that both goals kind of came down the left-hand side, as I say. But not going to go into him too much. I think a six. I think a five would probably be too harsh. I don't think he was as bad as that would suggest, to be honest. So yeah, we'll go with a six for O'Brien, and then Keane and Tarkowski I like to do together, as usual. And I think both were having very solid games up until City scoring the first goal. And I think you could probably argue both um, should probably be doing better for each goal. I think Keane's probably more at fault for the first one. He kind of Haaland's just able to slip away from him, and obviously, it's the intelligence of his forward play that has got him that goal. But Keane's maybe a little bit too naive for it, and there's enough people covering the 6 yard box there. He's able to go with the man, and he doesn't. So yeah, just a tiny bit of a lapse in concentration, as I say, from him there, and then Tarkowski for the second one should probably be blocking it. As I say, he's blocking Pickford's view. So if you're going to be doing that, you really need to be throwing your body in the way of that. It's not the most cleanly struck shot, clearly struck shot, I should say, from Haaland there. A bit of a Freudian slip there. Um, and to be fair, maybe Tarkowski's expecting that, and that's why he's not quite ready to defend the shot that's kind of just rolling along the floor. Um, but yeah, probably should but both are probably at fault for each goal there. I'd probably say, if I'm being brutally honest, but weren't up until that point. As I say, I'd mostly been solid and kept City mostly quiet up until that point. So again, it's not too much of a detriment to their performance. I'd say. I think a six for both of them is fair enough as well. And then Mikalenko to complete the defence, similar sort of story really. I think he did a lot better a job of dealing with Savinho than O'Brien did with Doku. Again, like I said, a more natural fullback, probably the stronger defender, I'd probably argue as well, to be fair. Obviously, we know Mikalenko's limitations going forward, and again, this wasn't really going to be a game for that anyway, to be honest. Um, but that did leave us quite flat on the left-hand side, with Alcaraz out there, which we'll get to in a bit. Um, but as I say, I think Mikalenko did a lot better job at, again, dealing with probably the weaker of the two wingers, in fairness to O'Brien as well, just to balance it out. I think Doku offers a lot more than Savinho does, and I'm not sure how many games Savinho's even started for City this season. I don't remember seeing his name too much, but yeah, they were clearly trying to get him behind using the pace on the wings there, and I think Mikalenko was a lot more um, adept at dealing with that. But it wasn't a standout performance from him by any means. Again, just a standard six, I think, for him. But yeah, I'm a lot more worried about the right hand side than the left hand side at the moment, I'd say. And obviously, once Bramthwaite comes back into the side, that left side's going to become even stronger for us. And maybe if you have a more designated person in Tarkowski over there with less responsibility to deal in the middle, that might help things out there. But yeah, obviously that's still a little bit of a way off. Although Bramthwaite was in training this week, to be fair to him, so hopefully he's ready to come back in for Spurs next week. Fingers crossed. Moving into the midfield, Gay again, just an absolute engine. Um, and again, I played a real big part in keeping City at bay for as long as we did. Um, and yeah, was able to contribute to the transition when, especially in the first half, when we were getting forward. Um, and yeah, I've been really impressed with Idrissa Gueye as usual, and obviously, and again, two very important games for him during the international break, and still able to play a huge role for us. Obviously, didn't complete the full 90 as you wouldn't expect with someone his age, to be fair, but still a very solid performance from him. I'm going to give him a seven, to be fair, just to break this spell of sixes that I've got here, to be fair. And then moving on to James Garner, going back to a six, I think here. Um, yeah, it's becoming a lot more noticeable, to be fair. A lot of people saying on Twitter that he's not the most progressive passer in the world, is he? And maybe being a bit more braver in that position might have altered the result a little bit for us. I'm not entirely sure, to be fair. I think he's a very safe option for us in the midfield. I've seen a few calls for him to be the solution at right back. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that, to be honest. I think we'd lose a lot from the midfield not having someone like James Garner in there. Um, Obviously, Merlin Roll came off the bench just to get into the sub, so I'm not going to properly go through it, to be honest. But just a quick mention for Merlin Roll, who came back in after injury off the bench, and again looked pretty tidy to be fair. So again, it'd be interesting to see if he's more involved against Tottenham next week. And yeah, it might be the case that he comes in that defensive midfield position and looks really solid there, and that does allow Garner to move over to right back. But obviously, no one's entirely sure how that's going to pan out yet. So as is, if it involves putting Ibabunam in there, then in the midfield, then absolutely not for me. I think James Garner has to start in the midfield in that case, and you have to stick with O'Brien there. But yeah, regardless, James Garner, pretty standard performance for him. To be fair, nothing of note really to say about him. If I'm being perfectly honest, as I say, the only real uh, thing I could really note is that, as I say, uh, definitely chooses a safe option, maybe a bit too much, and maybe could have been a bit braver. But to be fair, that wasn't really the sort of game for this. If we're being perfectly honest, so yeah, six for him, and a six for Dewsbury Hall as well, who obviously came back from suspension and was involved in parts, and there was some few nice bits here. There's definitely a player in there. I don't think we're properly playing to his strengths at the moment. Perhaps I'm not entirely sure if the role we've got him in perfectly suits him yet, or if he's able to get as involved as much as he would like. Obviously, we mostly go through the wings at the moment, and obviously we were mostly trying to look to get to the ball to Alcaraz and Ndiaye in this game. I'd say, and just we all kind of got bypassed a tiny bit. I'd say, um, but. But yeah, again, like I say, not a poor performance from him, and there's been a few games where I've been really impressed with Dewsbury Hall, to be fair. So I still think there's a lot to come from him. But yeah, again, some games like this just don't really suit attacking players, and that can lead to them getting like low ratings. I think that's usually quite harsh. To be perfectly honest, I think Dewsbury Hall's a perfect example of this. Like I say, it just wasn't really his sort of game to properly be able to take by the scruff of the neck, I'd say. Um, but just how formidable City are in the midfield. So, yeah, not overly concerned by Dewsbury's performance, even though it wasn't, like I say, it wasn't as involved as probably would have liked to have been. Um, and then, yeah, moving into the more forward positions, as I mentioned there, we'll start with Ndiaye. I guess, start with the overwhelming positive. Um, I'd probably go as far to say that this might have been Ndiaye's best performance in an Everton shirt so far. I thought every single time he got the ball, especially in the first half, it looked like he was going to do something magical and make the difference for us. And Twitter's been full of City fans absolutely raving about him. And yeah, obviously it's not ideal for him to potentially be in the shop window like this, of course. But as I spoke about on the podcast a few days ago with Harry, we'd rather. Um, we'd much rather our players be doing well and potentially getting some attention from elsewhere than struggling in that. And you've got to get into that mindset that we've got good players and we want to keep them. Obviously, it's kind of the approach we've taken with Bramthwaite over the last few years, and hopefully we take similar with Ndiaye, and it will take a very good offer to be able to prize him away from us. So yeah, I'm going to give Ndiaye an 8, and again, from a defeat, I'm not sure how many players ever get an 8 in a defeat, but like I said, I genuinely think he was that good for us in the game, and yeah, really excited to see what he can do against Tottenham next week. Obviously, thinking about the magical goal he scored in the fixture last season. Hopefully, a repeat of that would be very nice indeed. Then Charlie Alcaraz. Um, I have to caveat this performance straight away by saying that I really don't think he should have started, especially not in that position. We've seen Alcaraz on the wing numerous times now, and he's never looked comfortable out there. He's never really able to get involved as much as he'd like. Um, and obviously, of course, he came in last week against Palace and completely changed the game, but that is from a much more central position, which is clearly much more suited to him. So, yeah, I definitely would have been starting Dibbling in this one, and the fact that him and Ndiaye was swapping wings quite a bit as well just won't have done him any favours at all. So, yeah, obviously, I say he wasn't very involved in the game. Definitely wasn't a great performance from him, but I do have a lot of sympathy from him being out on the wing because, like I say, he probably shouldn't have been starting this game. So yeah, I think probably the wrong choice for Moyes, which is frustrating. But yeah, I think just purely based on that alone, I can't give him any lower than a 6 because, as I said, it's just not a comfortable position for him, and I don't think it's fair to like criticize him in a position that he's not comfortable in really. And then finishing off with Beto again. I don't think he should have started this match. I kind of knew he would, if I'm being perfectly honest. It does seem to be we just kind of flip between whoever nowadays. And and yeah, Beto stays on the pitch for a lot longer than Barry does, which is very frustrating to me. When you should if you're gonna do that, where one player gets a half and the other player gets 70 minutes, you'd surely do it the other way around because the more development Barry can get and the more minutes he can get under his belt in the Premier League, that the better it's going to be from his development. Whereas Beto just doesn't need it, and if he's not offering anything, then yeah, he shouldn't he should be hooked a lot quicker than he has been. Obviously that's been the case for him a lot this season. This game was a tiny bit different. He was actually quite involved a bit and had a few chances. It was the lack of the clinical edge, the cutting edge that was really hindering his performance there. And yeah, it's just frustrating because I do honestly think Barry had a lot to offer us, and we're just not giving him the opportunity to show it. There's little cameos here and there, and getting hooked at half time, which is just going to do like really going to hinder his confidence. So yeah, I really think he's being managed poorly, to be honest, at the moment. And Better's confidence looks absolutely shot to me. So I say it pretty much every week, hoping that like I'll just be able to manifest it happening. But Barry really needs to be given a run of games starting for us. I really think. But you must after 70 minutes, if it's not working or on the hour mark at least. But he keeps getting taken off at half time, and I just think it's really unfair on the lad. Um, and I think I think often I've Palace last time, for example, to be fair, I honestly don't think he was actually doing too bad. I think he was actually offering us was one of the better outlets for us in that game, to be honest. In a game where, especially in the first half, we looked really bad going forward, and very static. But Barry was at least trying to make things happen and had a few good chances. So yeah, it's frustrating. Another poor performance from Beto. I'm giving him a five. Yeah, I'm really fed up with him starting for us, to be honest. I really think he needs to be given a run out of the team. So yeah, hopefully we see Barry start against Tottenham and actually given a proper crack at the whip. But yeah, that pretty much rounds this one off. So yeah, please leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment below giving your thoughts on the players' performances, who you'd like to see start against Tottenham. Subscribe to the Toffee Blues channel for more Everton content, and we will see you in the next video. Up the Toffees.